Dear friend, welcome back to our journey through the life of Moses. Today we step into chapter 15, titled Rephidim, a place in the wilderness. Yes, but more importantly, a place of spiritual shaping. If you have ever served in a position of leadership, especially spiritual leadership, then sooner or later, you too will arrive at your own Rephidim. The people of Israel arrived at Rephidim, not by mistake, but, as the Bible says, according to the commandment of the Lord, they were exactly where God led them. Why would God lead them into a dry and dangerous place? Because God is not only concerned with what we do for Him, He is deeply concerned with who we are becoming in Him. That is why, dear listener, when you find yourself in a dry, difficult, or lonely place, do not be surprised. There are lessons in Rephidim that are worth more than gold. First, at Rephidim, we learn the limits of our own ability. Success is a strange thing. It often leads to pride faster than failure does. It's easier to be humble in a hidden valley than to stay grounded on a mountain of public applause. In times of success, we can so easily fall into the same trap as King Hezekiah, who once proudly showed off all his treasures to Babylon, or like Nebuchadnezzar, who said, "Is not this great Babylon that I have built by my mighty power, and for the glory of my majesty?" So God, in His mercy, leads His people to places like Rephidim where the wilderness stretches wide. The wells run dry, and our pride is exposed as empty vapor. Isaiah chapter 10 verse 15 asks, "Shall the axe boast itself against him who chops with it? Or shall the saw exalt itself against him who wields it?" No tool gets the glory, neither do we. God will not share His glory with anyone. Many once powerful servants of God have been set aside. Why? Because they began to trust in their own strength, their own talent, their own experience. They may preach the same sermons they once delivered with fire, but now they fall flat. They may pray the same prayers, but the power is gone. The breath of heaven is missing. And if they were honest, they might discover this. They began to rely on the momentum of past victories, forgetting that it was God and only God who made those moments powerful. Even Moses may have faced this temptation. For months, he had led with remarkable success. He had brought down Egypt's might. He had led the greatest escape in history. He had watched the Red Sea split open, then crash down on Pharaoh's army. He had sung victory songs, watched manna fall, and earned the title King in Jeshurun when the leaders of the people assembled. But success can be a dangerous slope. Maybe that is why Moses later warned the people in Deuteronomy chapter 8, "Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God, lest, when your wealth has increased, and all that you have is multiplied, your heart becomes proud, and you forget the Lord and say in your heart, 'My power and the strength of my hand have gotten me this wealth.'" The Apostle Paul learned this too. He said, "I will boast in my weaknesses," because when he was weak, God's power flowed through him most fully. In the same way, God brought Moses to Rephidim, to expose the limits of his strength, to crush any hint of self-reliance, and to bring him back to utter dependence on God. Job chapter 33 verse 17 says, "God does these things to turn man from his purpose and to hide pride from him." At Rephidim, the people turned against Moses. They were angry, exhausted, and dangerously dehydrated. Exodus chapter 17 verses 2 and 3 say, "The people quarreled with Moses and said, 'Give us water to drink.' They grumbled and said, 'Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us, and our children and livestock with thirst?' They were ready to stone him. Moses had done so much for them, but in one desperate moment, they forgot it all. They blamed him. They turned on him. And there was nothing Moses could do. No plan, no strategy, no human help. So he did the only thing left. He cried out to God. Moses cried to the Lord, saying, "What shall I do with this people?" That cry, raw and desperate, is holy ground. Friend, this is the place where God's power begins. When we reach the end of ourselves, when we know we cannot fix it, that is when God is ready to move. 2 Corinthians chapter 3 verse 5 reminds us, "We are not sufficient of ourselves, but our sufficiency is of God." Second, at Rephidim we learn much about God. God teaches us our weakness, so that He can reveal His strength. When Jesus asked the disciples how they would feed the 5,000, He already knew the answer. He was preparing them for the miracle. "Bring what you have to me," He said, and then broken bread, overflowing baskets, abundance. So it was here. The people grumbled, but God responded with patience. No rebuke, no anger, only provision. Exodus chapter 17 verse 6 says, "I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, so that the people may drink." God said, "I will stand before you." What a promise. The people had rejected Moses, but God did not. He stood with him right there, on the rock. This is the presence of God. In our loneliest, most pressured moments, God stands with us. And that rock? It wasn't just any rock. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4 says, "They drank from that spiritual rock that followed them." And that rock was Christ. The rock was a picture of Jesus, struck, wounded, pierced. And from that wounding came living water. He is the smitten rock, the one who was bruised for our iniquities, the one who gives grace when our souls are dry. And his supply never ends. Third, at Rephidim, we learn the power of prayer. Just when the people were refreshed, a new enemy appeared, the Amalekites, fierce warriors from the desert. While Joshua led the army in battle, Moses climbed the hill and raised his hands toward heaven. And as long as his hands were lifted, Israel prevailed. But when they dropped, Amalek gained the upper hand. So Aaron and Hur stood beside him, one on each side. They held up his arms until sunset, and the enemy was defeated. This is the power of intercession. When our arms are too tired, others can help. When we stand together in prayer, heaven moves. The church wins its greatest battles, not just on the ground, but on the hilltop of prayer. So, dear friend, what is your Rephidim? Is it a dry place, a difficult season? Are you surrounded by angry voices, impossible needs, or fierce opposition? Then you are right where God intends to meet you. He is waiting to show you the limits of your strength, so he can reveal the abundance of his own. He is waiting to teach you patience, presence, and prayer. And when you strike the rock in faith, living water will flow. Thank you for joining us today for Chapter 15, Rephidim. If this story encouraged you, please share it with someone who is walking through their own wilderness. Subscribe to our channel. We're walking daily through the spiritual journey of Moses and beyond. We'll see you next time in Chapter 16.